Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the PokerNews podcast. It is your girl, Sarah Herring, joined by my boy, Chad Holloway, getting ready to give you guys all the latest, the juiciest, the most interesting things to come out of the world of poker in the last week. We are sans Jeff Platt. Thank goodness, he's really been dragging us down, I feel like, the last few episodes. JK, but Jeff is busy, of course, going into the studio. I want to say it's probably the Super High Roller Bowl. He's kind of a big deal, and we can do just fine without him. So, Chad, first of all, how was your Memorial weekend?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's kind of bittersweet because this is usually the weekend where I am headed out to Vegas, where I'm driving out for the World Series of Poker and getting ready for that summer grind. And that's not happening this summer. In fact, this is my first summer in, I think, 12 years where I won't be in Las Vegas. I'll be home in Wisconsin, which, silver lining, I get to do the cool things here, like go to the lake, do some kayaking, do some fishing with my family. So I'm looking forward to that aspect of it, but it's still a little, like I said, bittersweet that this is the time of the year that I would have been stopping in Colorado, in Denver for a Colorado Rockies game, maybe on Memorial Day. And it's just not happening. It's the new world we're living in.
Completely new deal. And yeah, I feel the same way. I have had a couple poker players reach out and just, check in and say hi. And I was thinking, normally this is the time of year where we would see each other in real life and check in and say hi, how's the kids, what's going on, but not this time. And I'm actually really excited about it though, too. I'm pretty excited to be able to experience a summer outside of Las Vegas. Although, and this is not in our outline, but it definitely had me thinking, a lot of things are opening and going fully real. Like I was just with my my husband's family this weekend, and the kids, my nieces, they're getting ready to start swim lessons next week. The week after that, gymnastics, like all the things. I was like, what is going on? And so I'm like, swim lessons? Now we're all getting in the pool together? Like I feel like we've gone, it's happening really fast. Things are shifting really fast. And it definitely makes me curious and wonder kind of what's in store for us and what's in store for poker. And maybe you can talk a little bit about, sort of your thoughts. And still though, there are some things which are moving to going online. So clearly poker's not just 100% coming back, but what do you think is in store for us?
We've certainly seen a lot of movement in terms of poker coming back already, especially in Florida. It was just late last week that the Hard Rock Tampa relaunched, their poker room, their poker operations. They're playing six-handed down there, at 50% capacity, and they have the plexiglass dividers at the table. There's lots of pictures circulating online, and it's been a rousing success for them as far as, all the tables are full and there's a wait list. So the demand is there, the pent up, demand to play some live poker. And, Hard Rock Tampa is doing a really nice job, as are other venues, especially in Florida. I know the Palm Beach Kennel Club is one that also reopened, and they had a list of things that they were going to do, some protocols in place that were really well received by the poker community. The general consensus was game containment. And by that, they basically are limiting players from moving from table to table. You buy in the chips at that table, and those chips stay at that table. So you can't, cross-contaminate these chips over to this game and vice versa. You'd have to actually cash out. The cards, they were going to use paper cards so that they can change them out regularly and things like that. So it was, reading over it was like, all right, these guys put a lot of thought into it, and this actually seems pretty reasonable and maybe what we're going to see as the future going forward. Now, tournament poker, I think, is still a long ways away. Matt Savage, who, the tournament director extraordinaire, has been talking a lot about that point. It's likely going to be a long ways off before tournament poker returns. In fact, as head of live reporting for the United States, I was thinking about when that possibly could be just the other day. And I think the earliest that I could foresee it happening would be August. And I think it's likely beyond that, September, October, maybe a little more hopeful. But I would not be surprised either if there was no tournament poker for, say, the rest of the year, for the rest of 2020. I could see that being a possibility too. It just depends on what happens in the coming months and what various states and individual casinos are willing to do. It would be a bigger risk to host a huge tournament at this point in time. So.
Yeah, I can definitely see that there's a lot of other factors that go into the tournament side of things. Well, I know that the WSOP circuit, oh my gosh, what's the name of it? Like the Granddaddy something.
The Granddaddy Championship.
Yeah.
The Global Casino Championship, I think
Yes.
is what you're referring to. Yeah.
Yes. So the Global Casino Championship, which I thought was supposed to be going down in August, and I think everyone's been kind of waiting for what that would look like, is moving, in fact, online. So if that's any indication, it means I think that we're still safe from each other in the tournament poker scene for a little while.
I actually had the opportunity to break that story on Friday. It's the WSOP's MO to release big news either late Friday night, or in this case, they released it Saturday, but I kind of got the scoop and was able to publish something on Friday night that this year's Global Casino Championship was going to move online. Now, it's traditionally been held at Harris Cherokee in North Carolina, but because of the pandemic and the limiting social distance limitations and things like that, they decided to move it online. It's going to now take place on September 13th. Now, this was a pretty controversial decision, and I'll admit, when I first heard it, I was like, ooh, I don't know if this is going to be such a great idea, or at least players are going to like this or not, because what it is the Global Casino Championship has been held at Harris, North Carolina, Cherokee, North Carolina, for a while now, for many years, I think 4 or 5 years. And it's a live stop where players who have qualified on the WSOP circuit, both in the United States and internationally, come and battle it out for a big, payday and a WSOP gold bracelet. So you're talking about live circuit grinders who are now going to be expected to play this prestigious tournament online. And online versus live games, very different. I think the WSOP's thinking on this was to not hold the money in escrow for an undetermined amount of time, because they really don't know when they could hold something, especially with what's going on in North Carolina. They would have to wait for the government there to come up with certain protocols as it relates to gaming. It was just so many unknowns. I think they said, you know what, let's just try to host this thing. So they're going to host it, which means players now, instead of having traveled to North Carolina, will either have to go to New Jersey or Nevada to be able to play on WSOP.com. Interesting note that while Delaware does offer WSOP.com as part of a partnership and part of that interstate compact, it is not eligible for the Global Casino Championship. It's something with the software and the client. So you actually need to be in New Jersey or Nevada. And as I expected, it was pretty controversial once this news hit. A lot of the circuit grinders, many of them who have been qualified, weren't too excited about it.
That's interesting. It does add a different element, actually, that I didn't consider, because part of me just thinks, well, I mean, sorry, but we don't want to murder everyone. But then at the same time, if you have to travel to get there to be able to play, I think that also would put you at potential risk if the lethality of this virus is part of the factors in making this decision. That's really, I don't know, it's such a tough one. There's just so many, I think, decisions here where there's not really, not being able to maintain the status quo. I think there's a lot of times not really a good answer, like a fair answer.
Yeah, I think it's a tough spot for the World Series of Poker officials. And I do think that they had, considered a lot of different options, and that they thought that this was the best route to go. It could be debated for sure. I think other options maybe they should have considered were to postpone it, along with the WSOP, or maybe if it couldn't happen this year, to do it next year sometime, or even possibly combine it with next year's Global Casino Championship, so that, yes, you'll have the bigger field, but double the prize pool. Now, I don't know if that would have been well received either. I think it was a lose-lose situation on their part, that no matter what option they chose, that they were going to have their critics. And so I think they just went with, all right, given that, let's just go this route. That way it's going to take place this year. We are not going to hold all that money in escrow. And, players who are qualified will get to compete. Speaking of qualifiers, the GGPoker is having their online series right now. They're going to award, 2 seats. So that will bring it up to 130 qualifiers. And the WSOP also announced at the same time they're going to do a kind of last chance season finale online circuit event, which is going to take place in June, and that from June 3rd to the 14th. And that is going to qualify even more players, because what they're going to do is they're going to have 12 events, and the winners of each of those are going to win a seat into the online global casino championship. And that's their way of making up for the seats that were lost from all the canceled live WSOP circuit stops, that the pandemic interrupted. And so the winners of each tournament will get in, and then there'll be a casino champion will get the final seat. So they'll end up awarding 13 more seats to bring it up to 143 runners total. But also worth noting that anybody who has won a ring over the course of the WSOP circuit season, or anybody who finished, I believe, in the top 100 of the WSOP Player of the Year standings last year, are available to buy into this tournament for $10,000. And that's been in place in years past, and it usually adds a little bit to the field, but not a significant number. Maybe a dozen or so players would be my guesstimate. But it's hard to say now if, it'll be interesting, because there's those online pros who finished in the top 100 of the WSOP circuit who probably wouldn't have traveled to Harris Cherokee, but now they're like, yeah, I've got some online experience. I'm a pretty good online player. I'm already in Las Vegas. Let me jump on and see what I can do. And, that's a concern that's been expressed by the circuit grinders who are like, well, I'm not an online player. I traveled to, Cherokee and to Choctaw and to all these smaller stops. I'm a live grinder, low stakes. And there is cause for concern there, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was going to say, because I was making a video last week, which I think it was the main event, the 888 poker main event of their like XL Inferno series, that they also were going to receive a seat to this tournament. And it did make me think, so there's clearly going to be players who are going to be in this field, as you mentioned now, especially as they're adding in these other players who are maybe more experienced online players, or maybe that is even their main bread and butter is to play online. It does put the live grinders potentially at a sort of disadvantage, although it might also make it more interesting, for those live grinders who maybe consider that part of their all-around poker game to be able to play online. I don't know, it'll be interesting. Are we going to cover it? Speaking of the live reporting team for PokerNews.
Sure. Yeah, I would imagine that we are. We'll have to work out some details with the WSOP, but for the casino championship, global casino championship, I think for sure we've been covering the circuit up to that point. So we want to have that capstone on it. As for the online series that's coming up in June, hopefully we'll be doing some sort of coverage or updates on that. Sarah, what do you think of this idea that they possibly could have done? Is, a seat into this thing is worth approximately $10,000. I think it's a little less than that, but for simplicity's sake, let's just say $10,000. To say something along the lines of, you can either take $10,000 cash, you can use, or credit, maybe you can apply it to the main event when the WSOP actually takes place, or you can apply it to next year's event, or I don't know, different options like that. Instead of saying we're hosting this event, you have to play it, you have to make your way to Nevada or New Jersey, or you're shit out of luck.
I think that would definitely put them in a tough spot, considering it's $1 million guarantee, right?
Yeah.
They guarantee $1 million. So if they start shipping out 10K here and there and all over town, especially in the spot that the industry as a whole is in right now, it might be tough to maintain that guarantee, especially if, I think it would be one of those things where as soon as one or two people start jumping ship, then everybody's like, okay, there ain't gonna be no money left in the press. Well, we got to get out of here. Yeah, I don't know.
And it just speaks to the point, like I made, like it's a tough spot, right? It's,
yeah,
no matter what option they go, there's holes in it. And so, yeah, I think that they went this route. Ty Stewart did say that, he said, quote, "We want to do right by our players and see the promised prize money put up for grabs. Hopefully the choice of an East Coast or West Coast destination makes it more viable for qualifying players." which I think is a good point. You know, they do have New Jersey and Nevada, which are accessible to the
Yeah.
people on the coast who might have qualified. Kind of leaves those of us in the Midwest with a little trek on our hands if we were to have qualified. But
Well, I know we've already, good Lord, this is what happens with Chad and I. We're already like deep into this podcast and we haven't even gotten into the juiciest and most exciting stories that we have to cover so far, not to mention our guest this week, which we've been hyping and teasing for a few weeks now, is Maria Konnikova, speaking about this book that we've been patiently waiting for. She initially had intended to do her sort of experiment into the poker world for a year. After we had reached that year mark, I remember speaking to her and doing an interview. She said she felt she needed to extend this. There was quite a lot more for her to get from the poker world. And in fact, she really has made herself a part of this world in so many ways. And she's won tournaments, in fact, and her journey has been really impressive, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what Jeff has to say to her. And you also have already read most of the book.
yeah, and I've been looking forward to it for quite some time. As somebody who was often at these same stops where I would see her competing, knowing that she was doing research for this book that has been in the works for several years. And I remember at the PCA one year, I seen her sitting with Eric Seidel, who I know was mentoring her through this experience, through her poker journey. And so to actually have it in my hands and read through it, I really enjoyed it. And you know, there'll be a review for PokerNews when the book actually releases. I believe it's this coming month in June. And it was great. I really enjoyed it. I think there was a lot of comparisons to it sort of being a modern day, the biggest game in town sort of book that really chronicled the early days of the World Series of Poker. While this book isn't WSOP centric, I mean, it is involved, but it's not all about the WSOP. It really gives a great modern day look at what's happening on the poker circuit at the highest stakes, or, you know, at a higher stake, with somebody like Eric Seidel, who's been kind of a closed book for a lot of the poker media and poker fans. You know, he's been very private and hasn't opened up much, but he does in this book. And there's just lots of little great tidbits. One that sticks out to me was Dan Harrington, right? Action Dan from back-to-back final tables in 2003, 2004 WSOP main event. Kind of faded from the spotlight after he won a World Poker Tour title. And I always kind of wondered, like, you know, whatever happened to Action Dan? You know, I know he was getting up there in years, but in the book, she kind of gets the answer. And I read it and I was like, wow, that was great. I had no idea that was the case. And I won't spoil it. You have to read the book to check it out. But I'm definitely looking forward to hearing, you know, what she had to say to Jeff.
Well, I want to throw to that, and now would be a really easy, good time to throw to that, but I'm so excited to talk about this juicy drama. We're going to throw to Maria Konnikova in a little bit, but before we get there, it's very important, I feel like, Chad. You've got to tell me. You are the one who wrote this article. People were texting me all day yesterday about this Dan Bilzerian, Bill Perkins, Jungleman scandal, the drama. This is what I'm in this business for. Please, and don't hold back any details. Tell me what's going on.
Yeah, it's been an interesting past few days in the poker world. It all started this past weekend on Saturday night when a tweet went out from one Mr. Bill Perkins at BP22 on Twitter. I was actually driving and I got some texts on my phone, which happens when shit hits the fan in the poker world. I start getting texts from people I haven't heard from in a long time, like, what's going on? What do you know about this? And yeah, this was one of those cases because people were asking, what's up with Bill Perkins' tweet? And I'll read the tweet to you real quick. It said, cheating scandal in poker going on that would make the Mike Postle scandal look like a church service. Really hard to wrap my head around. I'm very disappointed in many people. Some you would call poker heroes. One person / pro showed integrity. Others failed miserably. #poker. Pretty juicy, pretty scandalous, but also very cryptic. And it led to rampant speculation about what the hell is this? What the hell is going on? I mean, if this is bigger than the Mike Postle scandal, which is huge, it would make it look like a church service. You know, everybody's minds were wandering. Everybody was firing up Twitter, jumping in. I finally got home. I got logged onto the computer, read about what was going on, and I checked my phone because, you know, I always develop a network of contacts, and I couldn't remember if I ever connected with Bill Perkins, but I looked. Sure enough, I had a phone number for him. Said, you know, what the hell? Let me shoot him a text, and I did. I said, you know, hey Bill, what's going on with this? And he was getting hit up by lots of people, obviously, and he did answer a couple questions before kind of cutting me off. That it was not live, that it wasn't involving, you know, the Triton High Roller Series, because that was one theory that was out there. It wasn't GGPoker, even though he did say it involved online stuff. It wasn't GGPoker or Party Poker. It wasn't a major operator. Anyways, he then went on and released another tweet shortly thereafter saying that that one pro who showed integrity was Jason Kuhn, which, you know, Jason, I think everybody loves him. He's always been a stand-up guy, so I think it was good to have that reinforced that he wasn't involved. But Jason is involved with both Triton and Party Poker, so everyone, you know, was just kind of like, what's going on? And then they got left dangling overnight, Sarah, which was very frustrating for a lot of people. I think it was kind of irresponsible in a way, because it let the speculation continue. You know, people, pros' names that had ended up having nothing to do with it were getting drug into the conversation. Online sites that had nothing to do with it were getting drug into the conversation. So I think it was kind of irresponsible in that manner. I won't say it ruined my weekend and the weekend of other poker media, Memorial Day weekend, but it certainly went from enjoying the weekend to all of a sudden this is a huge story that's put on our laps that we, you know, we got to try to work with and sift through, even though we have so few details. And there's more to the story. More details did come, but I just want to get your thoughts on things so far, Sarah, on just that first initial shock to the poker world that Saturday. Sarah, are you there?
Yes, I was just thinking, I'm like, did I lose him? Did I lose him? Keep going. There's more. There's so much more.
Oh yeah, there is. I just wanted to get your early hot take real quick. Like, you know, what did you think? What do you think of a tweet like that just being thrust out into the poker world?
Yeah, leaving everyone hanging was crazy, because of course everybody, like, the less information the more they're going to try to fill in. So he puts this out there. Everybody gets their popcorn ready. We're just totally coming in for the juicy gossip, right? I mean, come on, you're going to compare this to the Apostle scandal, and then just like, I'm sorry, nothing. And then we're just waiting. Yeah, I mean, I think you're exactly right. What's going to happen is people who probably shouldn't are going to get thrown under the bus. Places that probably shouldn't are going to get the rampant sort of speculation, I think, is actually worse maybe than just wait for it and let us know when it all happens or comes out. That being said, we do know when you put stuff out there in the poker world like this, even little nuggets, you go do a little fishing, the poker world is going to do some investigating. The poker world is going to dig deep, and they might even uncover some things that they weren't even looking for, if you want to know the truth.
Sure. And Joey Ingram, who is known for, you know, digging deep and uncovering things, was certainly hot on this case and was tweeting at the same time. We did get more clarity on the following day. On Sunday, Bill Perkins sent out another tweet. It said, "Settlement with one participant. Gave my word I would not publicly reveal unless they lied during questions." And he shared some details of the game. It's a private game, and it took place on an app that was downloaded amongst friends. And we've known that this has been happening in the poker world for a long time, that these high stakes players have private games on apps where the money is settled on the side, that, you know, they just fire it up, play. And, you know, we don't, as the poker media, don't really get access into that. It's very private in their own world. And basically what had happened was that a fish account, as Bill Perkins termed it. So they got, you know, a rich businessman or somebody, a fish, got on, and Perkins and others thought they were playing against this fish, when in fact it was a pro playing for the fish. So he was ghosting the account or playing on the account, which is another thing that everybody knows happens, but it's still highly frowned upon, I guess. And that there was an investigation ongoing, and that Bill Perkins really wasn't going to reveal who it was, though he thought that it would come out. that tweet in itself had a lot of backlash, I guess. A lot of people were saying, why are you protecting so-and-so? You know, you should be outing this person so that it doesn't happen to others, that this was nowhere near as big as the Mike Postle scandal. It certainly didn't make it look like a church service. A lot of pros chimed in that regard. Mike McDonald, David Williams, Matt Glantz, Doug Polk were some of the big names. And Bill Perkins, you know, engaged a lot of them on Twitter. You can go to his Twitter account and read back. There was a, you know, good conversation about it. It was kind of choppy waters for Bill Perkins, in my opinion. I thought, you know, he's taken the brunt of this, and rightfully so. He threw this tweet out there and left it dangling, and it sounded like it was going to be this huge scandal. And Walt, it is serious, and it probably involves more money than the Mike Postle situation. It you know, doesn't dwarf the Mike Postle situation in terms of I don't know, just how unbelievably offensive it was or what have you. People seem to be like, well, shit like this happens all the time. It's an unregulated app. What do you expect? Feel like he kind of got bailed out from the mob mentality that was forming against him by Dan Bilzerian, who, unlike Bill Perkins, wasn't afraid to throw somebody under the bus or to swing the axe and name a name. And he did in a tweet of his own, which has since been deleted. And he basically alleges that Dan Cates, aka Jungleman, is the offender, that he was playing on an account on the Fun Ocean poker app under someone named Sina Talib, an unknown really individual to the poker world, but apparently some businessman with a lot of money. So that Cates was playing on his account and winning money off people like Bill Perkins, Dan Bilzerian. Cates fired back in a tweet, a single tweet on Monday that said, "I can't discuss this right now for legal reasons, but this is misleading. I haven't played a hand of poker with Dan Bilzerian ever, LOL. More to come when appropriate, but there was rampant ghosted on the site that people have admitted to." And that's kind of where it was left. Some of the tweets, Dan Bilzerian's tweets, have been removed and what have you. And so it seems it's went from this huge Twitter public forum to now being taken back in-house, a private affair where, you know, legal lawyers might even be involved.
Okay, so I love how now the poker world, we're all trying to settle our beefs in the court of law, which is just really interesting, all things considered, from the sort of what the space of poker is and has been historically. But what do you think about, I feel, I have all kinds of feelings about this whole thing. First of all, tweeting something really publicly and then deleting it is kind of weird and funny, because obviously it exists now. Like once you've tweeted something out there, you can never really take it back, right? People got screenshots, like this is never going away. But I feel like it's interesting to me for Bill Perkins especially to make this sort of, you know, grandstanding or whatever, make this sort of public announcement and then say, I agreed to not say anything if the people didn't lie during questioning. It's this takes it then more in the realm of this sort of, you know, vigilante justice or something like that. Like, okay, now he can be the determining factor of what comes out and what doesn't come out. The whole thing is just so bizarre.
Yeah. If you want to know more, I know it was a lot that I had said and a lot to absorb. We just released a article on PokerNews, The Muck. Just go on there. It's on the front page right now. If it's not there when you visit, just type in The Muck or Bill Perkins or Dan Cates in the search engine, and it will pop up. You can read about it. There's a lot of the tweets shown there. My feeling on this is, you know, it's a serious matter if it is taking place. And that just firing a tweet off from the hip, because that's what it seemed to me, is that Bill Perkins discovered this. He heard this. I understand that he was angry, that he was disappointed in people, and that he reacted to it by throwing this tweet out there. I think something like this is more appropriate for like an investigative sort of piece where you don't reveal a lot of details publicly. Like maybe a New York Times investigation. I'm not saying the New York Times should pick this up, but I've done such pieces for PokerNews. I know other poker media have as well. or Joey Ingram. You get the ducks in the row, you get the evidence, and then you put it all out there at once, instead of it being, here's a tweet, rampant speculation, here's a few more pieces of information, and everyone shares their opinion, and in the end the people involved really don't say anything, because now they're clammed up either solving it privately or lawyers are involved. And I'm all not, I wasn't a fan of Bill Perkins not saying a name either. You don't throw a tweet out like that and then protect the person. And he did have his points that he said on Twitter, you know, that he had concerns that this could ruin this top professional's, you know, poker career, poker life, that he had a lot to lose. And I understand that, but also if what you're saying is true, and this top poker pro is cheating, is stealing money, it's just, you shouldn't protect that. It's just opening the door for it to happen to other people. I'm sure there's a lot of politics involved, a lot of friendships involved, and things like that. But then that's all the more the reason not to just toss it out there haphazardly onto Twitter. Yeah, it was a mess, and it still kind of is, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out from here. Though I don't think we're going to get much more in terms of public information. I would be surprised if you know, if the discussion continues in the public sphere.
It's interesting also to me, this is just a random aside, but I love the Bill Perkins calling someone a fish, and the idea that amongst these circles, I mean, if we're including, say, Dan Bilzerian and Bill Perkins in these circles of people who are playing these apps together, it definitely makes me, I would love to see someone do this type of investigative journalism where they somehow manage to get in these games or in amongst these circles of incredibly wealthy people. Who does play these games with these people? I guess Jason Kuhn. I'm pretty sure, oh my gosh, Jeff Gross, you know, who gets in these amazing games? And then if Bill Perkins and Dan Bilzerian are calling someone a fish, like, an invitation to those kind of games would be the best thing in the world. You should be outing like anybody who's messing with this kind of dream setup. And I don't know, I'm interested. Tell me more about what Daniel Cates, what sort of hot water he's been in before, and does this seem similar?
It's not the first time that Cates has found himself in, you know, controversial situation, shall we say. I know back in 2009, there was a huge cheating scandal involving a online player by the name, he was a Portuguese prodigy is what he was nicknamed, and his name was Jose Macedo, aka Gira online. And there's a whole article about that from back in the day on PokerNews. And basically, from what I understand, you know, he was an 18-year-old poker prodigy. Everyone thought, all right, this is going to be the next big up-and-comer. And then it turned out that he was basically being ghosted by others, including Daniel Cates and Harish Kuswebi, something like that. I don't remember the exact details. Like I said, this was almost a decade ago, but it goes to show you that, you know, there is a little bit of history there. And Jungleman, well, he is a well-known online player and has done a lot in the live realm as well, is very popular. He has been involved with controversy in the past. And if you've ever met him, and I know, Sarah, you have, you know, Jungleman is a unique character, shall we say.
Yeah, he's definitely a character, that's for sure. Well, I'm super, super interested to see how this kind of plays out. I think, especially at those high levels, there's, you know, it's super, super important. And I think it's something that people really put a lot of value on is sort of just integrity, right? And that a lot of these players and people who are, you know, playing at that high of a level it requires a lot of, I think, personal integrity to be able to be at that sort of level and to be able to, you know, maintain those type of relationships and friendships. And so I think it will be really interesting to see how this whole thing plays out. And while I hope we don't have to keep taking all of our issues necessarily to the courts, I think, you know, overall it makes poker look not so good. But I also would hope that this is settled in some public forum, because I feel like once you put this kind of stuff out there like this in the public space, you kind of have some sort of obligation or responsibility to, you know, button it up for the public, right? If you're going to get us all heated up, you got to feed us a little snack every now and then.
Yeah, the whole situation reminded me of a story I did back in 2016 involving one Mr. Phil Galfond. And I think what I'm about to share is a good example. If there are any poker pros out there that has any kind of qualm or a scandal that they want to share and get out there, maybe instead of firing it off on Twitter, to do something like Phil Galfond did. And, you know, of course, we always praise Phil Galfond, but I think with good reason. And this is another good example, was he reached out to me back in 2016 about some high stakes games and basically some thievery that was going on, some money that was being lent out and not repaid. And instead of, you know, just throwing it out there on Twitter, he privately reached out, said, here's what's going on. I think this is something that I want to share with the poker playing public. And, you know, what would be the best way to go about that? In this particular instance, we, you know, I tossed it over. I discussed it with some folks, and we came to the conclusion that just given the circumstances, that this would best be like an op-ed by Phil Galfond. And if you go to PokerNews and you type in PokerNews op-ed, you'll see from February 16th, 2016, Phil Galfond wrote an article speaking up about high stakes thieves. It's really good. It's really well thought out, and it lays out what happened, not just you know, innuendos or what have you. He put a lot of time and effort into that. And if I recall correctly, it led to some change. It led to some public pressure for some of the individuals named to actually pay back. I won't go into too many details on that. You can read the article for yourself if you want. But it just reminded me of, you know, there was a responsible way of introducing a very scandalous topic to the poker world. And there are other examples I've done in the past with PokerNews. I know there was one many years ago involving Dwight Pilgrim allegedly hustling other players. And, you know, I worked really hard with some of the players to compile evidence and come up with the story and the narrative and present it in a responsible way. So I always just think that's the best way to go about it. And there are a lot of poker media out there who would be more than willing to help out in that regard. Myself, but also people like Joey Ingram or Haley Hintz, many others out there too, that would be happy to help. So if ever there's a case, like I said, I recommend that route, as opposed to what we just saw this weekend of firing off a tweet that is going to start a shitstorm.
Well, I think that's the question that we all should be asking ourselves all the time, which is, what would Phil Galfond do? And as a poker world, I feel like, you know, if you're ever in doubt, just always ask yourself, what would Phil Galfond do? And speaking of the man, the legend that is Phil Galfond, if you guys are not in the United States and you are interested in trying out a poker site which is, I think, focused on, in fact, integrity, and is headed by, at the helm, the leader we all love, Phil Galfond, you guys want to check out Run It Once. And you, in fact, can get some sign-up bonuses if you use our code. You go to once.run/PNPOD. That's once.run/PNPOD, and be sure to check out Run It Once. Now, if we move on from this story, which I hope we're going to keep having to circle back to, I really think there's a lot more there that needs to be looked at. But in the meantime, you know, without giving too much speculation or getting ourselves into any sort of legal troubles, or I don't know, clearly if they're worried about legal troubles, then we can pump the brakes and see where this goes. Let's talk about some things that I think are infinitely easier to just cover and get into. Super High Roller Bowl, as I mentioned, is going on. That's where our boy Jeff Platt is right now doing his filming, and already Daniel Devoris scoops a 600K 6-max score. Daniel Devoris just crushing it per the usual. Also, speaking of Run It Once, I feel like he's a run it once. I want to say he does strategy bits for the site, but it's really good to see Daniel out there crushing like he is and has been, because he's been around for ages. I feel like for many, many years now, he's been coming in, say, second, third, runner up, almost there. And then just really in the last few months has gotten quite a few, got that monkey off his back, if you want to say that. And I'm really happy to see him out there crushing. What else? What do you want to talk about with the Super High Roller Bowl?
Well, it is taking place online, like all events are nowadays. Just to point that out there, it's a party poker online event, but it's still pretty exciting. I'm looking over some of the winners from this past weekend, and in addition to Daniel DeVoris, I know that Big Huni, one of my favorites on the circuit, Chris Hunichin, beat Victor Blom heads up for a title in the high roller event, super high roller event, 25K for almost $500,000. So that's pretty cool to see. Chris Hunichin go up against Victor Blom, two online legends. Also worth noting that both Kristen Bicknell and Alex Foxen, poker couple, nearly captured titles in two different events. They had to settle for runner-up finishes, though, respectively. So that was, worth noting. And then just seeing some of the players who are in action in this thing. Fedor Holes, who I know we had on the podcast not long ago, Nick Petrangelo, Dan Smith. These are just some of the people who are cashing in these events. So it's pretty exciting. These, Super High Roller Bowl live events, as we've become used to over the years, are always pretty exciting. And so to see it move online, it's different. Yeah, it might not get people as excited because you're not seeing the players in person or playing, on Poker Go. But it's still pretty exciting and pretty cool, given the times, to see some of the best battling it out.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting because it speaks to sort of what we were speaking about earlier. You have some of these live pros who that's their bread and butter. That's what they do. And no shade at them at all. But, when you look at these guys who are able to shift so seamlessly from the absolute highest levels of live poker right into, the highest levels of the online game, it's really interesting. And I think there's a lot of players that we probably wouldn't see who absolutely belong in these events and who maybe just aren't traveling the circuit as much. I was, in fact, really excited to see Sergei Rykek, who won two events back-to-back at the EPT Barcelona last year, like I think a 25K and a 50K or something like that, two high rollers back-to-back. And I was just like, where did this guy come from? And then, since then we've seen him scoop a lot of big high roller tournaments. And I think these are a lot of guys who say maybe if it was playing out in Las Vegas or maybe it's playing out in London, maybe they would fly overseas, maybe they wouldn't. So really, I think because it's playing out online, we're able to see a really exciting mix of the best and maybe some of them who wouldn't be playing it at all if it was live. I, in fact, look at Pascal Lefrancois, who missed our WSOP 2010 reunion tour podcast on Friday. Looks like he was just over here busy trying to ship some of the Super High Roller Bowl action. But I'm throwing shade at you, boy. And you guys will get to hear that soon.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a good tease for upcoming episode. Pasquale finished 11th that year, so didn't make the November 9, but made a deep run. But yeah, Sarah, we got to catch up with some of that year's November 9ers as well as some other special guests, and that was a pretty fun experience. I'm excited to share that with everybody.
It was a great idea. So Chad watched a reunion of the cast of the Goonies, and he was like, dude, we need to do this for some WSOP final tables. 2010 was both of our first year working at PokerNews. So we did a WSOP 2010 reunion of that final table, plus a few other surprise guests who you guys will love. And that will be on next week's episode. Before we get to, we've got, of course, Maria Konnikova coming up later. I want to talk a little bit about Scoop, Borgata. We've got a couple more tournaments to cover, but before we get into that, we want to, let's throw to Daniel Negreanu talking a little bit about his role as an ambassador and why he is so excited to be a part of GGPoker.
What's up, people? D-Negs here. As you may have heard, I signed on as an ambassador for GGPoker And you may be wondering why. Well, the key reason is the product, okay? They have the absolute best software on the market, not just the desktop, but also for mobile. In addition to that, they really have invested into this GG Masters, right? It's a $150 buy-in freeze out. You know how I feel about freeze outs. And there's also a big carrot at the top. Leaderboard prize up to $500,000. Each and every week so far, there's been added money. So come get yours. Use sign-up code PokerNews.
All right. So while we're talking a little bit about the online world, which is where we all pretty much live right now, let's talk a little bit about what has been going down with the Scoop.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long grind, a long online grind with the Scoop. I think we're approaching event number 100 or close to it. And it's been happening for the better part of a month. It's exciting. There's been a lot of great headlines, but I'm certainly ready to move on past Scoop, if you will. There's been some big names to capture some titles, though. Some of the more recent ones, Andrew Pantling won an event just the other day. Patrick Leonard, Dominic Nietzsche, Kenny Hallert, Steve O'Dwyer, Adrian Mateos. Connor Drynan has been just tearing it up. He's won 5 titles already this Scoop series, which is a record, beats Sean Deeb's record of 4. There's more events now and what have you, but you can also argue the fields are a little tougher now. It's a whole other debate. Still a very impressive accomplishment. And then there was the Scoop 2020 $10,000 main event, which was won by one Alex Giers from Belarus for $920,000 after a 3-way deal with Pablo Brito out of Brazil and Canada's Alex de Felix. They each locked up about $750K, right in that neighborhood. So another great Scoop event. I mean, the Scoop main event has been one of the premier online events for many, many years.
And if you guys are looking to catch up on anything you may have missed, or if you just happen to, I guess we're already on the second chance, so unlikely that by the time I get this up and out, but possibly if it's still going on, you guys can find all of the action on PokerNews.com. Basically, if you're looking for any of the major tournaments going on right now, PokerNews is covering everything. So you guys can go on there and check it out. And Chad, before I let you go, let's talk also a little bit about what has been going down at the Borgata.
Yeah, so Borgata, like so many other casinos in the United States, is shut down. But they have in New Jersey a little thing called online poker. I wish more states did. And in there, they have BorgataPoker.com, they have Party Poker US, and they have BetMGM. And together, they make up the BetMGM network, if you will. And for the past few weeks, they've been hosting several online series, the most recent of which just wrapped up, and it was a mini series. So it was devoted to basically the micro stakes. It had buy-ins from as little as a quarter up to $20 rather, and PokerNews was live reporting them, which, I know people don't get very excited about the micro stakes, except for people who play the micro stakes, right? So this was their opportunity to see their name highlighted on PokerNews. And it was pretty exciting to, we've covered $1 million buy-in tournament before, which, is awesome. But this last week, we also covered a tournament that cost a quarter to buy into, which, so that's the range right there of the PokerNews live updates, I guess. But it was a good turnout. The main event was only $10 to enter and was won by one Rick Sanchez, who, I'm a big Rick and Morty fan, so I was happy to see that screen name take it down. So big congratulations to him. There are going to be a lot more Party Poker US network online series coming up throughout the summer, and PokerNews will be doing updates on those. So be sure to look out for them at PokerNews.com.
All right, guys. Well, it's the moment we've all been waiting for, really for weeks. Let's get serious. Let's get deep into the mind of, I think, one of the coolest and most interesting women to come into poker, maybe ever, but certainly in the last decade or so. Let's go to Jeff and Maria Konnikova.
All right, she is the author of The Biggest Bluff, How I Learned to Pay Attention, Master Myself, and Win. It comes out June 23rd. Maria Konnikova joins us now on the Poker News podcast. Maria, how is quarantine life treating you?
It's going wonderfully, Jeff.
Wow.
2 days ago, I spilled water on my brand new laptop for the first time ever. And it's now somewhere in Texas getting fixed by Apple because it no longer turned on at all. So that's been a highlight, and the rest of it seems to be going about the same.
Well, at least the book is done, so you don't
Yes.
need the laptop as much as you did maybe when you were in a crunch towards final edit. So let's dive right into it, Maria. And I want to start with a question that you've probably heard 100 times, that I've probably asked you 2 or 3 times myself. Why this project? What drove you to enter poker and to not just do that, but to write a book about your experience?
Well, originally it was not a love of poker. That's, I think, what would have driven a lot of people, because I think oftentimes when you see books written about poker, it comes from people who really love the game, who then decide to share it with the world. For me, the love kind of came much later. I had no idea if I would like poker. I didn't know basically anything about the game. I didn't know if I'd be good at it. I didn't know anything. But what drew me to it was this idea that I could use it as a way of looking at chance, of looking at the way that chance and skill interact, and figuring out, how much of our lives do we control? How can we learn to tell the difference? How can we make the best decisions we possibly can? And this wasn't my idea, in the sense that I wasn't like, I want to write about luck. Poker is the way to go. It came from John von Neumann, who's the father of game theory. So it came from game theory, because game theory came out of poker. John von Neumann was a poker player. And so that's what drew me to the game. It was this idea that maybe in poker I could find a way of dealing with a lot of things that had been going on in my life, and just trying to figure out, how do I learn to deal with luck?
And I know you had studied plenty of game theory going into this, but with that said, were you aware of the, I guess you would call it, the balance between skill and chance in poker going into all this?
I mean, I was aware to the point that I had done some research beforehand to make sure that this was going to work. Okay. So I saw that, so the way von Neumann described it is that, you have games like chess, and while wonderful games, he's not interested in them at all. He thinks they're actually rather boring from his standpoint, because the solution, there's always a right answer. You can always tell if someone's doing something correctly or making a mistake. You can solve the game because everything's out there. All the pieces are out there. You have all the information you need, and theoretically you can decide. And then there's stuff like craps or roulette, where it's a crapshoot. There's just nothing there. It's all chance. And so in that sense, it's also boring, because, it's just, it can be fun to play in a casino, fun to throw the dice, but it's boring from the standpoint that he was looking at it. Poker, as he described it, was perfect if you were interested in strategic decision making, because it was a game of incomplete information. So there's information I have, there's information you have, there's information that we have in common, and otherwise it's a game of playing people, of playing kind of the signs, and trying to figure out, based on how you're acting, on what you're doing, what you have and what's going on. And he thought that this was really the best way to solve strategic decision making, to have a rubric for really going deep into these questions of, how do humans actually think? How do I learn to make a good decision based on incomplete information, which the world is. I mean, the world is not a chess game. We never have all the pieces. We never see the entire board. There's always part of it that's hidden. There's always part of it that's missing.
Getting Eric Seidel to join you as your mentor, your coach, whatever title you want to use, knowing what you know now about Eric the person, Eric the human being, Eric the poker player, do you feel even luckier to have brought him on with you a couple years ago?
Absolutely, 100%. I had no idea just how much I'd lucked out that Eric had been my first choice. I mean, he's the only person I approached, and he agreed to do this. I mean, how do you just, not knowing anything about poker, how do you luck out like that? Like, Eric is something else. He's such an incredible person. Not only is he an incredible poker player, which I knew going in, that's why I chose him, but he's just an incredible human being. He's so nice. He's so selfless. He's so kind. And he knows everything about everything. He just has such a boundless enthusiasm and passion for the game and for the world. Like, he loves theater. He loves restaurants. He loves music. He loves all of these different things, and he just shares that energy with everyone. And honestly, I don't know, first of all, I don't know if I would have become good at poker in the way that I did if I had a coach who didn't match me as well. Like, if I'd gone with someone who was like really math heavy and was like really stressing to me from the get-go, like, here's how you use a solver. Like, I eventually got there and I eventually started using solvers, but like that wasn't the first step. Or if I had someone who didn't just absolutely love the game and love it for the right reasons. So I think he gave me some of that love. And that was one of his gifts to me, was making me realize why he loved the game, so that I fell in love with it as well.
And there's a great nugget in the book also about Eric skipping a super high roller tournament because he just wasn't feeling it. And so, this tournament's so hyped up. It's a massive buy-in. Everybody's expecting the best of the best to play. He's in town. He's ready to go. And then he's like, not this week. Not for me. I'm going to go back to New York and chill and take in a Broadway show. Was that a good lesson to you? Like, you don't, just because it's on your schedule doesn't mean you have to fire.
Absolutely. It was so crazy to me, because one of the things that Eric told me over and over, whenever we were at a stop together, like one of the ETs or something like that, because I tried to do a poker schedule where he'd be at most of the places where I was playing as well. It wasn't always possible because, I'm not going to the Triton events, for instance, because I can't afford the Triton events.
I know the feeling, yeah.
And he's not going to Dublin because there's nothing there for him.
Right.
The highest buy-in event, I think their high roller was a 3K or a 5K, something like that. That was the high roller. So it wasn't a perfect overlap, but as much as possible, I tried to kind of be where he was so that we could review hands in person, so that we could kind of talk. And something he always told me every single time is like, this is just a blueprint. See how you feel in the morning. See how you're feeling. And I always thought, like, I never took it seriously. I just always thought he was saying that to make me feel better, because I'm not a late night person. Like, I need my sleep. I'm so tired of poker. It's like, it's crazy. Like, right now I miss live poker so much. It breaks my heart to think I'm not going to be able to play until 2021, and maybe I won't even feel comfortable playing in 2021. But when you're there, there's the excitement that keeps you going, but then I just want to sleep, and I'm always so tired. And so I always thought that was his way of making me feel better, because I lacked the stamina that it took to be a real poker player. And then he does this thing. He's like, I wasn't feeling it. I went to New York. And I was like, mind blown. Wait, seriously? Right? Like, seriously, Rick? You're just not gonna play it? And he's like, he never feels compelled to do something just because he thought he was going to, just because it's expected. He really means see how you feel. And it's such an important lesson to just constantly check in with yourself. See, like, how did I sleep? How am I thinking? How am I playing? Is it a good idea for me right now to play again or not? And it's very hard. It takes so much discipline. You've been to so many different poker events. The adrenaline, and like, you just want to fire again, right? You bust and you're like, all right, let's go. Like, you're in it, and you're kind of, you're feeling in, like, you're in the zone, and you might as well do it because you're there. But that's a bad way of doing it. And I think the other great reason that Eric ended up being such a great coach is that a lot of the things he taught me were things like that, right? Like, things that were, see how you're feeling in the morning, check in with yourself. Things that a lot of coaches who just focus on strategy and like, let's see, we want to be raising here 25% of the time.
Yeah.
They miss out on all of the other elements that will make you a good poker player. That's part of it. I mean, learning to identify your energy levels, that's a huge part of being successful. You don't want to play when you're not thinking clearly, when you're tired, when you're not at your best.
Well, a perfect example of this, of the quote unquote "see how you feel in the morning" technique, is the dilemma you face in playing the 2017 World Series of Poker main event. Did you feel a lot of pressure, because of course the organic plan, the original plan I should say, was okay, let's have the main event, the pinnacle of poker, be kind of the pinnacle of my own personal timeline. So did that almost force you to lean towards playing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I just really didn't want to reassess anything. That I had thought to myself when I sold the book originally. I mean, I remember, making all the announcements and all this stuff, and it says it's going to follow, Maria for a year and all these things. And then, I've met a lot of people along the way. I think I met you in 2017.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I'm going to be playing the main event, and I almost felt like I had to do it because that was what was supposed to happen. And that was the plan. That was kind of the announcement. That was, what the little release of my book said. Oh, we sold this book. She's going to play for a year and train for the World Series main event. And it was just this kind of public commitment, but also commitment to myself that this was going to happen. I'm playing the main event, damn it. and the thing is, like, the main event is expensive. That's 10 grand. That is a hell of a lot of money. I mean, just to give you some context, like, my first salary out of college as a writer was $23,000 a year.
Wow.
So I was in New York making 2 main event buys for the entire year. So, and it's not like I'm a gazillionaire now. Like, it's a meaningful amount of money for me. And I don't know, I just couldn't look past the fact that I was supposed to play the main event. And so I won't spoil anything from the book, but it did not go according to plan.
So you're saying you did not win the main event. Can we spoil that much? You did not win the main event in 2017.
Come on, Jeff.
Okay.
What about my face on the posters? I mean, you've seen me.
Right. Okay. We take that back. So I guess along those lines,
I did become the main event champion in my heart.
There we go. And that, Maria, is really all that matters, especially in poker.
Especially in poker. In poker, what's in your heart is the only thing that matters.
Right. That is all that matters. Who cares? So
I'm actually a billionaire.
Are you really?
I am, yeah, because in my heart.
Oh, because of all of the success in your heart.
I've won all of these events. Yeah, everything.
I was going to say, your hand in mob's impressive, but I mean, it doesn't, quite have all those digits.
Because it doesn't, the hand in mob is actually flawed. It doesn't have everything that's in my heart.
Right. It's very clear. We'll get in touch with Eric at the hand in mob so they can adjust those.
Thank you. So, I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. So your book description sums this little segment up better than I can. It says, quote, "But in the end, Maria Konnikova is a writer and student of human behavior, and ultimately the point was to render her incredible journey into a container for its invaluable lessons," end quote. I think it'd be very easy, Maria, and part of me thought that this was going to be the book. Like, okay, I played here in December, I met Eric in January, I played these tournaments in February, then in March, then the main, okay, and then we're done. But how important was the lessons aspect to you entering this project and then finishing this project as well?
I mean, it was hugely important, and I think it became more and more important because at the beginning I went in, like I said, not really knowing what I was expecting, not knowing what I was looking for, not knowing kind of I didn't know what the book was going to be. And as I got to know Eric, as I started really immersing myself in this world and in this process, I realized that poker was a much better metaphor for life, a much better learning laboratory, a much better everything than I could have ever imagined. And if you go into it with kind of the sort of deep mindset that Eric brings to it, all of a sudden, a hand of poker is no longer a hand of poker. There are all of these lessons about life, about decision making, about emotional control, about attention, about all of these creativity, about all of these different elements that you don't necessarily associate with poker. And I honestly don't think that I would have learned a lot of these lessons or internalized them in the same way so that I could apply them elsewhere if it weren't for poker. Because I think the beauty of poker is that it's an immersive game, and it's a game where you're actually learning by doing, and that's how we learn best. So in a psychology course, you might be learning about all these biases and learning about self-control and learning about emotions and learning about all this stuff, but ultimately you're in a classroom, right? You're not actually experiencing it yourself, and so it's a little bit limited, and so you might think you understand it, but the theory never actually translates into practice, never really goes into your own life, because you can't internalize it in the same way. It's the same thing as, like, you can't learn to drive a car from a diagram, right? You're gonna have some problems. Like, you might know how things work, but you're probably not going to be a great driver when you sit behind the wheel, or learning to fly a plane, to be even more extreme, because you read in a manual how it's supposed to be done. And so poker is actually it's actually like learning to drive by getting behind the wheel, except for your mind, except for kind of your thought process.
And when you were, quote unquote, learning how to drive, you mentioned running into an angle shooter, I think pretty early on in one of the smaller buy-in tournaments. Was that a wake-up call of sorts that, poker, let's be honest, isn't like 100% full of good, genuine people?
Absolutely. I mean, my introduction to the poker world was Eric Seidel, and then I went to Vegas, and Eric brought me to Aria and sat me down at a 25K table where he was playing with Jason Kuhn and Ike Haxton and Fader Holtz. Fader was there at the time. This was still when Fader was playing full time. And and Dan Smith, all of these guys are there. And I'm like, oh, wow, poker isn't just interesting. Like, holy shit, look at how brilliant and wonderful everyone is. This is great. And from there I go to the Golden Nugget, not to look down on the Golden Nugget. It's an invaluable part of Las Vegas, but like going from the high roller section of the Aria, which is a new room, is really kind of dedicated to poker and having kind of the best of the best of the best there. I had no idea at the time, by the way, that this was like poker's elite. Like this was as good as it gets. I was like, oh, these are poker players. Like, this is what poker players are. And then I get, dropped off at the Nugget or Planet Hollywood or, any of these places, and go play, their daily tournament or their nightly tournament. And all of a sudden it's very different. Not just the poker room, but the people. All of a sudden, you've got people who are drinking at the table, who are making lewd comments, who are hitting on the dealers, who are hitting on me, who are being rude. And I don't think all of them are like, I don't want to say that they're all like nasty people, although some of them are. The angle shooter was really nasty. This isn't in the book, but I actually ran into him a few days later. I saw him at another daily tournament, and I was like, holy shit, I'm out of here. But like, I saw him like angling his way. And then I knew that also confirmed that I was so right, that this was kind of what he did. When I saw him there, I left. And there are actually truly like nasty people like that guy who just takes advantage of people and cheats. But then there are just people who, they're there to have fun. They don't want to like think about what they're saying. They're not used to seeing a girl at the table. And so they just, and probably if I were to tell them, you're making me really uncomfortable, they'd actually probably be pretty rude at the moment because they're drinking. But then, like, they'd probably be like, "Oh, sorry," like, and some of them would probably even call me ma'am and say, "Sorry, ma'am," or something like that. But the atmosphere is very different. And I met some nice people even in the very small stakes tournaments. But it was just so different. It was just like night and day. It was a totally different atmosphere, totally different experience. And honestly, like, if I weren't a journalist going into this knowing that I'm going to be writing a book, and I didn't have that dual mindset, if I wasn't able to like separate myself, because I had some nasty experiences along the way. And if I couldn't just say, this is going to be great for the book. Like, I'm really uncomfortable and I want to cry right now, but I'm not going to.
Right.
Because like, this is going to be great for the book. And if I hadn't had the contrast of Eric and kind of the other people, and I knew that was possible, I actually, like, if I had just decided to try out poker, I don't know that I would have liked it or stuck with it as a female at the beginning, because I think if you don't know what's possible, and if you don't have someone kind of supporting you, and if you have no reason to be there other than to have fun, I don't know that I would have been having fun at the beginning.
Yeah, that
changed over time.
That brings up, Maria, a really interesting point. And I know it's cliche to say, it's tough for a woman in poker. Poker is overwhelmingly masculine. But do you think the way poker is constructed today, that it is very intimidating for a woman to enter the game of tournament poker?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I hope that will become less the case.
Sure.
I'm hoping that one of the things my book will do is bring more women to the game, and then we have some just incredible ambassadors for the game out there, like, people like Kristen Bicknell, who's like just crushes it at the highest levels, whether her gender has nothing to do with it. She's one of the best players in the world, and she happens to be female, which is awesome. Okay, go Chrissy, go. It's wonderful. But so there are people like that, and so I'm hoping that will bring more women to the game. But when you're just starting out, I think that one of the reasons that this gender imbalance persists is because kind of at those lower levels in a lot of these tournaments, it's just not very friendly. And my experience really changed over the years, and I'm not sure if it's because I became a sponsored pro. People knew who I was. Like, I actually won tournaments, and like, people recognized me, and so I wasn't anonymous, and they didn't just treat me anonymously anymore. And I moved up in stakes. I was no longer playing the dailies, but I was playing tournaments that were much more expensive, and so the players change as you move up. But my experience became much better, and I've had far fewer negative things happen in the last 2 years. In the last year, let's say a year and a half. And I wonder if that's evidence that the world is changing a little bit, or if it's just a fluke because who I am and what I'm playing and where I am has changed. So I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you said it. Our audience is on this specific podcast is probably familiar enough with your story that I'm not, spoiling anything for the book, but, we're talking about you becoming a sponsored pro for Poker Stars. You win the national at PCA. I think it would have been very easy for you to say, okay, book's over, hero's ending. I just won the national, cool, I did it. This is the hero's ending of all heroic endings. Why did you decide to keep going with your story and not end it, boom, right there?
I thought for a lot of reasons, but most importantly, I had fallen in love with poker, and it was teaching me so much, and I was learning so much about myself, that I wanted to keep going and see what I could do. And I also, I didn't want to feel like I just got lucky, right? The premise of the book was to kind of learn to tell the difference between skill and luck. And anyone can tell you, you know, to win a tournament, you have to play well, but you also have to get incredibly lucky. And I was like, well, like I clearly got incredibly lucky. And it's, you know, I didn't want to think of myself as someone who just got lucky and then left the game and was like, okay, I'm done. I wanted to prove that I was actually a good player. And it was to me and also to other people, because a lot of people, I got a lot of pretty nasty pushback actually when I was getting a lot of media attention at the time. And there were people who were saying, oh, like luck box, like you can't actually play, you're a shitty player, like all this stuff. And I this is it's not the best motivation, but one of the reasons I wanted to be like, screw you, I'll show you that I could actually play. But it was also like, most importantly, it was to show me that I could do it, that it wasn't going to be like a one-hit wonder, that I wasn't going to just like win this tournament and then not be able to ever final table anything ever again. And I also, you know, I think that if you're looking at poker as a life metaphor, as a way to kind of look at life, then the hero's ending is just way too simple. You know, it's so easy. That's not the way that life works. You have to keep going and see what else there is out there. And so I think I did it for a lot of different reasons. I'm very glad I did. And I also didn't want it to look like, at that point, because I really came to admire the people, the world, I also didn't want it to look like, you know, I just kind of dipped my toes, did well, and now I'm going to write a book.
Sure.
I really wanted to be a part of the world, and stay a part of it, and make sure that my commitment to it was obvious.
Well, I have about 46 other questions, but let's hold those until we do a part 2 with you when the book is out in a couple months. But for now, Maria, why don't you give everyone just the easiest route as far as pre-orders are concerned for your book?
Sure. So it's coming out from Penguin Press, and the Penguin website has links to all of the different places that have the book. You know, it's available on all the usual suspects, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I personally would love it if you ordered it from an independent bookstore, from your local store.
Yeah.
They're all, you can do it. And there's even a link on the Penguin website to a few different websites that will find your local bookstore, because I think right now it's just so important to support local businesses and make sure they flourish. So that would mean a lot, but honestly, it just means a lot if people want to pre-order the book. So whatever is most convenient for them. If they want to order an ebook, that's great. If they want an audiobook, that's great. You know, if they want to order from Amazon, that's wonderful. You know, wherever it's convenient, I think is the way to go.
Well, I can't rave enough about this book. I'm not just saying that because you're on. I've told you that offline as well. I had very high expectations, and you even managed to blow those out of the water. Oh. So that you did an incredible job. And thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Josh. It's been an absolute pleasure.
All right, everybody. Well, like we said, next week we will come to you with a really exciting podcast with the WSOP 2010 main event final table list. Some of them didn't make it. A lot of them did. A lot of players or a lot of people, in fact, that we didn't know if they would make it did. And it was a super, super fun little ditty, which we will have for you guys next week. And in the meantime, Chad, anything else before we let them go?
I think that's it. You know, they got to like us, right? Subscribe, give us the 5-star review. And then I'd be remiss if I said when Maria Konnikova's book hits the market, which is coming up here this next month, check it out. It's well worth it. It's a great read. You won't regret it.
All right, guys. That's it from us. We'll catch you on the flip side. Deuces.
The key to winning big is using every little bit of knowledge to your advantage. At Oddschecker, we give you the edge. Better odds, better picks, and better offers to make you a better bettor. Why settle for less? Quickly compare the odds at every sportsbook to ensure that you're getting the best price to maximize your return. Not only that, but we have experts on every sport, from hoops and football through to soccer and boxing. Our experts analyze the form and study the stats to deliver you totally free picks and parlays. Oddschecker also highlights the most lucrative welcome offers in the industry. If you're looking to open an account, then you are eligible for hundreds of dollars in totally free bets. If you're new to legal sports betting, then we're here to help, offering simple advice to understand betting guides and updates on your state's current legislative situation. Visit us at www.oddschecker.com/US. Oddschecker, sports betting smarter.